Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast. This is Sam.
And I'm Sophie. This is our first episode ever,
where we talk about all things scary and mysterious. This is Sinframundo.
So our first episode, how do you feel?
I'm excited, I'm nervous, but I'm looking forward to the journey with you.
Same. I'm excited for the journey, and thank you for all who's joining us on this journey.
Yes. I'd like to thank anyone who's taken the time to listen to our podcast. I would recommend to go grab your choice of drink, whether it be alcohol, juice, or soda. We don't judge here.
Coffee, tea, you name it. We truly, wink, are joining you. Yes.
Alrighty, so let's give a little
background on who we are.
Yeah. So as you knew in the introduction, my name is Sam, and I am friends with Sophie. We've been friends for 10 plus years, and it's been a long, beautiful journey of friendship.
Definitely. It's been good to know you, and I want to continue knowing you.
I started crying.
Just start crying on here. That's all it is. It's just about us.
Yeah, we're just the whole
Tricked
episode
you.
is just
it's
crying.
It's not about ghosts. It's just about our love. No, but really, Sam and I, all we talk about is true crime, the unsolved, paranormal, you name it. We talk about all things mysterious all the time. So why not record it?
Yeah. Instead of just keeping it at home and keeping
forcing
it to
other
ourselves,
people to listen to it.
Yeah, might as well force all of you guys to listen to it.
Yeah, the whole world.
Yeah. But we're bringing to you an interesting podcast where we will discuss things that maybe you don't feel comfortable talking about with your friends or your family, any paranormal or scary or mysterious things, or even if you have questions, we're here to be your friends and to discuss those things with you.
And we'll be with you on that journey, because there'll be times where Sam will do research on something and I'm just going to react to it, and then vice versa.
Yeah, so maybe you might have some questions that she can ask for you, and I'll be more than happy to answer, and vice versa. She also will be doing her own research, so I'm excited about that. And this is something we've been working on for about a few months, and we've been working really hard with our own busy schedules. But this is something that we're both passionate about, and something that we're really looking forward to taking our time to do.
Yeah, and we hope that you love it too.
Yep. Our first episode, we will be discussing the origins of The Conjuring. If you have not watched it yet, it's a quick disclaimer that I am going to go into details regarding the movie and, like I mentioned, the origins. So I would suggest to stop this podcast now, maybe go watch it, and come back and listen to this podcast. If you have watched it, I'm excited to share my opinions and also some information that I've done some research on, and it's just an interesting thing to look up.
Yeah, definitely. I can say I only know a few things about the true story, so I'm excited to hear your deep dive.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. So the film Conjuring was released in 2013, which baffles me because it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. And
yeah, because I even remember going to the movies with you and watching them with your brothers. Yeah,
it's kind of sad, it's
time
makes
flies.
me feel, actually one of my favorite horror movies. I just love that movie. That is why I chose this first episode to be about The Conjuring. So basically, it is based on the case files of Ed and Lorrain Warren. If you didn't know, this was had nothing to do with the Perron family. They did not consult to this film. This was strictly just the case files of Ed and Lorrain Warren. The movie was actually toned down to what actually happened because the director, James Wan, wanted to keep it PG. Even with what he did to try to keep it within PG, it still didn't qualify. He made sure to keep no sex scenes, no profanity, but based off it being so scary, it had to be rated R. Which just shows, how, gruesome. Well, I can't say really too gruesome because he tried to even keep it
as realistic as possible.
Basically, he didn't get the PG rating. So he wasn't really happy about that. But the movie follows the Perron's family move into the old Arnold estate farmhouse in Harrisville. The estate sat on 200 acres of farmland and was established in the 1700s. The Perron family was one of the Warrens' most popular cases. The father was named Roger, and his wife was named Carolyn, and they had 5 daughters. One was named Andrea, one was named Christine, one was named Cindy, and Nancy and April. Prior to moving, they were living in a small home and were having issues where they lived, but because of financial problems, they were unable to move and were not looking to move anytime soon. But it was one day when Carolyn, the mother, was picking up the newspaper, and she opened it up and she fell in love with the farmhouse. It was right there. It was as if it was calling for her.
And I imagine it was also probably a bigger space for the whole family, because it sounds like they have a big family. Most
definitely. The house they actually lived at the time was very small. So it was like a dream house for them. It had, like I mentioned, 200 acres of land. It was had over 14 bedrooms. And because they had some issues in the neighborhood, which if you are interested, you should definitely read the trilogy, which was based off Andrea Perron, her version of what happened. And it's called House of Darkness, House of Light, which she goes into detail more of what happened in the neighborhood prior to moving in. And basically she sold the farmhouse and she impulsively called a realtor at 9 p.m., which is like, it's like a weird time to call a realtor.
Yeah, it is a really odd time.
Yeah, and she called and she answered and she got an appointment for a showing the very next morning.
Which is, it's a good sign for her, but then it's also a cause for concern because we know what's coming.
Yes, she didn't tell her husband. Her husband was actually a salesman. He sold jewelry in the trunk of his car and he traveled a lot. She didn't want to tell him because, like I mentioned, they weren't financially there to make a big move. Especially, we're talking about a house that big. You can just imagine how much it would cost. So she still, went. She fell in love with the house. The owner of the house at the time was Mr. Kenyon. He was an old man, and he was being pressured to move out of the house because his son wanted him closer, and he was living there on his own. So that's why he was selling the farmhouse. So when she fell in love with the farmhouse, she impulsively gave them a check of $500.
Toward the house.
Yeah, towards the down payment of the house.
Wow.
Yeah, so then it was an earnest money check. Basically, it was just to hold the house, but she still had to come up with more money to make a down payment. Mm-hmm. Her husband came home from work and she told him about it, and obviously he wasn't happy because she left basically enough money for milk and bread. And she was able to convince him to just go to the farmhouse just to look at it,
like see it for himself.
Mm-hmm. And he went to go look at it, and as expected, he fell in love with the farmhouse too, and so did her daughters. He was so in love with it that he came home, and with some talking with his wife, he decided that they were going to make the move and that they were going to do whatever they could to save up for the down payment. And they had a boat, which they worked together, remodeled it, sold it, and then they sold their house. The kids did some little side jobs in the neighborhood, and they were slightly short from the amount they needed. But Mr. Kenyon, which is the owner of the house, he grew an attachment with the family. He thought that this would be a best fit for them, considering they had 5 daughters, and it was such a nice place for them to raise their family. So he made them a really good deal on the house.
Basically an offer they couldn't refuse.
Definitely.
That's something I always think about when I watch horror films or I hear stories. I'm like, how could they stay there? But then I realize, well, they don't have a choice. If you just bought this house, you just moved into this home.
Oh, yeah.
You spent money, you put money into it. You really have no choice. But
exactly.
Either you put up with anything creepy or you just try your best to ignore it.
Yep. Exactly. That was a lot of the questions they received. Why did you stay there for 10 years? But it's more than just what it looks like. There's a lot that goes into why someone doesn't relocate. It's not that easy. Especially during that time, a lot of things were going on. Not just with their family in the world, It wasn't as easy to move And in December, that's when they sealed the deal. But the mom didn't want to move because it was the holidays. So they decided, this was in 1970. And in 1971, in January, is when they officially moved in. And they were moving in. And right when they moved in is when they experienced, within 3 to 5 minutes of moving in, it's when they experienced their first paranormal experience. They saw an apparition. So within the time that they were moving in, the dad was unpacking from the car, and he gave Andrea, which is the older sister, a box. And he told her, go take it to your mom. And she went in there, and she was passing by the dining table, and she saw Mr. Kenyon. He was packing the last of his belongings as they were unpacking.
Okay.
So he was just, finishing up the last of his belongings, and she saw an oddly dressed man standing there looking at Mr. Kenyon packing his belongings. And I say oddly dressed because it wasn't, what he was wearing wasn't of this time.
I see. Mr. Kenyon, has he ever experienced anything paranormal, or is this something you're going to touch on later?
Well, he never mentioned anything paranormal.
That's odd.
Yeah, he never mentioned anything paranormal. And I watched many interviews with Andrea Perron, she said that he never commented on it, never wanted to discuss it.
Wow, that's weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she, said good morning to the apparition, which at the time she said it looked like a person, so she didn't question it and did not respond to her. And she went to the kitchen. She told her mom, like, hey, who's that guy there? And her mom said, there's no guy there. Mr. Kenyon's son hasn't came yet, And then another sister came, same thing. And then the other sister. And it wasn't until, I believe it was the sister Nancy who came in and said, I just seen a man disappear in the dining room.
That's creepy. Can I ask, if you were in that situation, what would you do? If your child came up to you like, Mom, I just saw some creepy dude disappear.
As much as I want to say that I would leave with a quickness, I mean, if we just moved in and we just literally sold everything we had to get this house, I would try to just come up with some logical excuse as to how this happened. That's what I would do, to be honest.
Yeah.
What about you?
No, I think any person would probably try to brush it off. Or like, oh, it's just your imagination. Oh, it's your imaginary friend.
But, to the mom's surprise, she had a lot coming for her specifically. So it wasn't just the daughters that would be dealing with things. It would be her, unfortunately. So after they were done packing and unloading the truck, there was something Mr. Kenyon mentioned to Roger that stuck with him and will stick with him for a long time. He took him out for a walk, and he whispered to him and said, for the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night.
Mr. Kenyon said this to the father?
Yes.
So he knew?
Oh, yeah. Well, we can assume he knew, right? But we never had a confirmation. But we can assume he knew. And at the time, Mr. Roger did not think anything of it because, like I said, it's not like you come to the conclusion that there's a haunted house, So he assumed that he, said that to him because the house was fairly large, and he thought for the safety of the daughters to not fall off the stairs or, go into the bathroom or something, that he would always have the lights on.
I think I would have been like, can you expand on that comment? Because I'm not sure what you mean by that.
What do you mean, sir?
And also, do you know how expensive the electricity bill
Oh, yeah. Most definitely. I'm sure it was super expensive. And it was not until months later that they found out from everyone in the community that there was not a night they drove by that farmhouse and the lights weren't off.
Wow.
So even when Mr. Kenyon was there, he had lights on all the time. And like I mentioned, he never admitted the house was haunted. And it was assumed that he did not mention it for the fear of sounding crazy. One day, Mr. Kenyon, after they moved in, came to visit, and the mom mentioned to him, this is after they moved in, they started, dealing with hearing stuff, minor things going on in the house. And she mentioned to him that she would hear strange noises in the parlor, and he just winked at her, and he just said that he was not discussing it.
Really?
Yeah, and every chimney in that house was covered. Not one chimney in the house was not covered, and it was extremely cold in that house.
You're saying it wasn't covered in, meaning that it wasn't in use?
No, he had them sealed, all the chimneys, for some reason.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had them all sealed, and that house was really big and very, very cold. So during their move, I also want to mention that they attempted to bring their pets inside the house, and they did not want to go in the house. They had a dog, and they had a couple cats, and they were crying. They didn't want to go to the house. They ended up getting the dog inside the house. The cats, after a while, I don't know, can't say how many days, but they left and never came back. And it was within 2 weeks that their dog, which was named Schultz, passed away.
Not a good sign, because first, if the children are telling you and then your pets are refusing, that's always like the first signs of a haunting.
Yeah, and we don't know exactly what was seen as to how they found their dog dead, but in the book House of Darkness, House of Light, she does not mention the dog's death because she said it was very traumatic. In the movie, coincidentally, it does happen in the movie as well.
Yeah, I remember that scene.
I believe the dog was named Cindy or something like that, or Sadie. There you go. So I think it was Sadie, and the dog did pass away. So that was something that was true with the real story, but obviously different name. And then also noises. Their beds would move. So when their beds would move, they would wake up and they would just move their beds back against the wall. But then it started getting to a point where their bed started levitating.
That's scary.
Yeah, I don't know about the levitating. And it's tough because, it's not like the daughters can get up and leave. Like, they're little.
Yeah, and even when you're a child, same thing. You don't understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You try your best to explain it as a kid, but no, there's no explanation for that.
Yeah, and they actually had a ghost that they would, say was like the sweeping ghost, because you would hear the broom sweeping, and then you would go and check it out, and you would see like a little pile of
like dust.
Yeah, like they just got done sweeping.
What's like a convenient ghost to have?
Yeah, everybody says that too.
I'm down with that one only.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I wouldn't mind it. So not all the ghosts or spirits, however you want to reference it, not all of them were negative or were bad. There were some that had good experiences. We're talking about 10 years of events. So I'm not going to go into detail of every single experience they had with the paranormal within 10 years because, it's just,
the list goes on and on.
It goes on. But we can talk about some that were mentioned in my research that I did and in the interviews that Andrea mentioned. Like I said, the dishwasher would turn on, the toilets would flush. That seems like a pretty good ghost.
Yeah, I was
gonna
say like all these ghosts that you're mentioning sound like
flushing
they would,
toilets,
make my life a little easier.
Cleaning,
They folded laundry.
That was not mentioned, but I wouldn't mind that either. The family would hear objects crash through windows, but when they would go check the window, it would not be shattered. The spirits would make the home smell like rotting flesh.
Yeah, no, thank you.
They would get birds who would crash into their house, and which is also shown in the movie. There was ghosts that would be trying to call Nancy down to the cellar well. And even to the point where the parents had so much activity going on in the room that they had to abandon the room and just make a room in the dining room. By the dining room.
I think they kind of showed that in one scene in the movie as well, didn't they? When they're all sleeping together in the dining room.
Because they were scared to sleep in their room. The girls would continue to experience activity, but they would not want to communicate with their mom because within the time the mom moved in there, she started feeling depressed and she didn't know why. She started deteriorating. She got really skinny. Like I mentioned, very depressed. She didn't want to eat. And the girls sensed that and saw that the mom was being affected as well, and they didn't want to stress her out. So the dad didn't want to believe them because, he just spent all this money moving into this house. And, as well, he didn't, as a dad, he probably felt like he couldn't control what was going on, as far as like we were talking about the paranormal,
Yeah.
he couldn't protect his family as far as like doing anything in that house.
Did he himself ever experience anything?
So there was an entity who lusted for him. He really didn't have much bad experiences in that house. It was assumed that the entity who was basically like
the main cause of everything,
the evil one in that house that was like, you know, suppressing the mom, was the same one that was lusting over the dad. And it was assumed that it was because the entity felt that the mom was taking over the motherly place in the household. And it didn't like that.
So it favored him for sure.
Yeah. And there was another incident that the girls dealt with. One day the girls were playing in the house, and I believe they were playing hide and seek, and Cindy hid in it was like a solid oak kind of box, and it didn't have a latch. But when she tried to get out, she couldn't. She was stuck in there. And she was screaming and nobody can hear her. I think she was there for like 20 minutes until I think it was one of the sisters passed by, and then she curiously just opened it because she was looking for her, and she found her and she was soaking wet. She was sweating in there. She couldn't breathe.
That's traumatizing.
Yeah, and they never found out what happened because, like I said, there was no latch on the box.
Something was holding her down.
Yes. But, like, you know, we had some negative experiences. There was positive, and there was a ghost that would tuck in the girls at night and kiss them.
It was probably the motherly figure.
Maybe she was the one that was doing the sweeping and flushing the toilets.
I mean, it sounds like there's different types of energies there.
Yeah, a lot. Well, we're talking about 8 generations of families.
Yeah.
You know, a lot happened there, and it gets very hard to kind of fact check everything, because,
or even pinpoint, this energy is probably from this family.
Well, yeah, when we're talking really the paranormal, no one knows. There's no way someone can say, oh yeah, this ghost was this person that passed away. You can't, you can just assume. But are there theories? Oh yeah, there's a lot of theories, and one which I'll get into in a little bit is one of the biggest one that is very sad to talk about, because this person who's obviously been passed away for a while, was affected by this rumor that took in the movie Conjuring, which she was made the villain in the Conjuring, and she was a real person.
Oh no.
There was also another spirit in there, which they nicknamed Manny, and it was a kid that would play with the youngest one, April, and she never talked about him until 30 years later, because she was afraid that they would make him go away. But she said he was really nice.
Did he stick out with her throughout these years, or?
Well, it's hard to say, because the only one that has spoken out about this, well, not the only one, but has done a lot of interviews and has been very outspoken about it, is the oldest sister, Andrea. She's the only one out of the family that has talked about it publicly. Yeah, the other sisters refused to comment on it. Yeah.
I mean, it must have been traumatizing for them.
Yeah, I can imagine. There was another evil spirit that was an older man, which they don't go into detail, and I don't think they ever will, which I don't blame them. But all that Andrea has said is, just know that there was an old man and 5 little girls in that house, and that's all.
Oh God.
Yeah, and they never go into detail, but she said he was a very evil spirit.
Yeah, no wonder they don't talk about it.
Cindy was actually one of the, other than the mom, that dealt with it the most. Like, she dealt with a lot of things. For example, she could hear a lot, like in her room. She would say that she would hear voices telling her that there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the walls. She would have her bed shaken routinely. Everybody would in the house, but hers was the most. So
she said there was soldiers in the walls. Is there any sort of history behind that area?
Yes. So the current owners of the house, which I believe moved in 2019, have confirmed that they did some digging, and they did find some skeletons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was confirmed. Cindy was the one that got hit hardest, and it's assumed that the reason why was because she died when she was 2 months old. Because she had a major birth defect, and she went into major surgery, and they brought her back to life, and that she came back as an old wise soul, and that the entities knew it, so they gravitated towards her the most.
Because she basically went there and back.
Yeah. And then going back to the mom, like I mentioned, she grew depressed. One day, the house was very cold, so she couldn't take it anymore. And so she decided to open up one of the chimneys. And that's when things started getting pretty bad. I guess when she started changing around the house. So that same day that she opened up the chimney, which her daughters, after they came out of school, they helped her. She got in the shower, and a neighbor came by with a cake. And Andrea went upstairs to tell her mom that the neighbor was over, and the mom told her, oh, go make her some coffee while I shower. And she did. And then they started hearing the mom screaming, and they ran upstairs, and they saw the mom getting beat by a heavy wooden coat hanger.
Just floating.
Yeah.
What the?
The neighbor just left and never came back to the house again. The mom had bruises and abrasions all over her head, her neck, and her chest.
I just want to say F that. If I would have seen that too, I'd be like, girl, you need to get out of this house.
Yeah, it's I can't fathom how someone can, deal with things like that for 10 years. But again, I'm not in their situation. I wasn't in their situation too.
I mean, like you said, it even seems like they're really protective of it too in some ways. So it could just be they have this weird attachment to it, or it's attached to them.
Yeah, it could be. There was some of the sisters that have, for example, Andrea, who did have some kind of attachment to the house in a positive way, and it had negative, situations, but she has good things to say about it as well.
Makes sense with the book. It's The House of Light and Dark.
Yes. So the mom began to age fast. She lost a lot of weight. She began to wrinkle, and they couldn't recognize her anymore. She started to look like someone else. The mom would feel pinches and slaps, and she one time felt something piercing in the back of her calf, like if someone were to stab her with the needle. Yeah. She got really into researching the history of the house. She was known as a historian, and the family started noticing that she started to dress a little different, wearing clothing that was not from that time. And she also started to speak in archaic English. She would reference to the men in the village as yeomen. It was just very different than what they knew their mom to be. But they assumed that she was getting really into the history of the house, and she was just, changing because of that.
From an outsider, it just sounds like something's slowly possessing her.
Yes. That was what was assumed. And in the movie, it actually shows that she was possessed. But this is where it kind of gets a little confusing, because I watched a lot of interviews with Andrea, and she would say, my mom was never possessed. But then when we go deep into what actually happened, there was a seance. And she then, in another interview, she said if she was possessed for a small amount of time during that seance. So she wasn't possessed before the seance, and maybe she was possessed during the seance. We don't know. We'll get into basically introducing Ed and Lorrain Warren, how they got involved. So in the movie, it shows that the mom goes to see Ed and Lorrain Warren, and she reaches out to them. But in reality, that did not happen. To this day, no one knows how or who it was, but a woman pretending to be Carolyn, the mother, contacted someone in a college, some guy from college that did, deal with the paranormal as well. Mm-hmm. Once he showed up to the house, he had an experience that was so profound and disturbing that he felt that he needed to contact Ed and Lorrain Warren. Mm-hmm. So Ed and Lorrain Warren showed up to the house the day before Halloween in 1973. And introducing Ed and Lorrain Warren, Ed is a demonologist and Lorraine is a medium. They met at the age of 16 and married in 1945. The couple got into haunted houses when Ed left art school after World War II. and the couple began taking trips to New England to sell his paintings to tourists. Ed was curious about places rumored to be haunted, so he would visit and begin drawing the house from the road. I don't know about you, but if I saw someone painting my house or drawing my house, I would be kind of
creeped out.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess he would sketch the houses, and then Lorraine would, go to the house and show them the artwork, and then they would be invited into the house. But prior to going to the house, they already knew it was haunted. They just wanted an invitation.
That energy,
yeah. They wanted an invitation. So that happened, and they were being invited to haunted homes, and they would speak to the families about their experiences in their homes. And in 1952, the couple formed a New England Society for Psychic Research, which they used to investigate reported hauntings and help those who are being haunted. So that's a little backstory on them. So in the movie, it shows that they moved into the house, and everything was positive and happy, and they helped the family, but it wasn't like that. They actually came to the house and visit the house within the span of 1 year. You'd probably say it's 5 to 6 times in that year. And the last visit wasn't a pleasant visit. And that was when they recommended a seance, which didn't go good. They brought a priest, they brought a medium, and they brought like a whole crew with like cameras and everything. So when they did the seance, the mom was sitting in a chair, which is, the way that it happened in the movie is similar in some way, but not fully similar. She was sitting in the chair, and she started, her body started to curl in ways that one would think that you would hear bones snapping. It was not normal. And then her chair started levitating, and she was thrown 20 feet away. And her husband was, thought his wife died. So, and keep in mind, he wasn't a fan of the Warrens. Like, he was convinced to go on with it, but he wasn't happy that they were there in the first place.
He wanted no part of it, basically.
Yeah. As he tried to run to his wife, Ed tried to stop him, and which didn't show in the movie, but he socked him. He socked Ed, and according to Andrea, broke his nose. And the medium was collapsed. Their experience she had, but she was on the floor as well. And he told them to get the F out of his house and to never come back. In the movie, it showed that it was very different.
Yeah.
But this was based on the case files of Lorraine, so you would assume that she didn't want to paint a bad picture of themselves. And then after this seance, everything was kind of quiet in the house. They assumed that whatever entity attacked her mom scared the good ghosts away, and it was quiet for some time. But even after, they still dealt with things. I think the last thing that was kind of like, okay, this is it, was the mom was in the dining room one time, and she saw 2 men standing by the dining room, and she saw a whole family having dinner with a different dining table, and that one of the men looked at her, tapped his friend to look at her, and they both looked at her, and that they looked at her like as if she was the ghost. And she felt that was going to be, if she continued to stay there, that she was going to end up being one of the ghosts in that house.
And she didn't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame her. And there is like that theory that people think that maybe it's just timelines overlapping, and maybe that's what hauntings are. That's
exactly what Andrea feels, that house is just like a time lapse. Like, yeah,
things happening over and over again, and then energies get stuck there.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like there's a bunch of different energies stuck there.
There is a lot. And so that's when she, at the time, they actually, this was within a 10-year span, so they had enough money to move out, and they did move out of the house. They moved out, and this was, like I mentioned, 10 years after, and they moved to, I believe it was Georgia. Yeah, it was Georgia, and a brand new land. And they still dealt with things afterwards as well.
I was going to ask you that. Did anything follow them?
Yes. And to this day, she still deals with things, which we're going to dive into that right now. So let's get into what happens afterwards. Ed and Lorraine Warren reached out to Carolyn to see if she wanted some part in the movie. And she said she wanted well, at first she said that she was going to talk to her husband about it. That same day, I believe she was somewhere in the house, I think, but there was a door that they had there that was unleashed. It was like a random door they had there, and it fell on her randomly, just fell on her, and it like cracked her skull.
Well, oh my God.
And after that, she called her back and she said, no, I want nothing to do with that movie. So then that's when it went on to be like the case files of Ed and Lorrain Warren, and family had no part in it as far as getting any money out of it.
Oh, they have not been compensated at all?
She offered her a shitload of money. Because it was
no.
Warner Brothers. She didn't know. After that incident, she said nope.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame her. I'd be scared too, to be honest.
Yeah, and
this ghost over here harassing them to not get a check? Come on, that's messed up.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. Sorry, this is the first episode, so I'm sorry, guys. But let's also get into one of the ghosts I told you that had rumors. So Lorraine assumed that the ghost that was the evil spirit was of Bathsheba. So Bathsheba was someone who lived across the street from the farmhouse. She was a wife, and she had 4 children actually. 3 who didn't make it far. But it was normal at the time. Back in the day, it was normal for kids to die soon, babies to die soon. So she only had 1 child that survived, past her as well. But basically, she said that she was the evil entity in that house, and that she was a witch who sacrificed one of her babies, and that she hanged herself in that property.
And is this information that people could find in terms of history? Like, oh, that's for sure a real person? Or this is just someone that Lorraine read?
She said she had a psychic vision.
Okay.
And then she said that it went with the remember I mentioned, because the baby that was supposedly under her care, that they found the baby with that the baby died under her care, and that they found like a hole in the base of his head, kind of like a sewing needle stab.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I guess, there was no proof of that, but I guess that she lived a miserable life because everybody around her and the surrounding area, everybody believed that she did it, and that she was a witch, and that infant died under her care because of that, and that she sacrificed the baby for Satan. And she did live a miserable life because everybody believed that, and that's unfortunate for her. And who would know that after she died it still went on, because Lorraine had a psychic vision that she was the witch that was taunting the family, which even to this day we can say that people were messing around with her grave. And just to mention, you cannot prove that she was haunting the family,
or that she was really this witch that they claimed that she was. Yeah,
and it was common. And in the movie, when you watch the movie, it is mentioned by Lorraine in the movie that supposedly Bathsheba was related to Mary Towney.
I think it's Eastie. Yeah.
Which she was actually wrongfully accused of being a witch as well, and unfortunately they hanged her, and this was during the Salem witch trials. This stuff is just crazy.
Yeah, a lot of innocent people were killed during the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
Men, women, children. I was reading about it a few months ago. If there was a woman that wasn't married or she was poor, they'd be like, you're a witch because you're evil. So they would hang her. But then also if there was a woman who was successful on her own, she's a witch, she's only rich because, and then they would hang her.
Yeah, and
you couldn't win.
You were left with admitting it, even if you weren't, because if you admitted that you were, they would tell you okay, you are a witch, okay, whatever, ask for forgiveness, okay, we can move forward. And if you were really, you weren't, and you were trying to stay true to yourself, they would hang you.
Yeah.
So either you were hanged, or you admitted to something you weren't.
And then you were shunned from everyone around you.
You had no, it was bad.
Yeah, really dark time.
So a lot of things in the movie, weren't all, there was a lot of discrepancies. And that was one of them. And like I said, that people need to stop saying that it was her, that she was the evil entity, because this lady died years ago. We're talking about a long time ago, and people are messing with her grave.
Yeah, disrespecting it to this day.
I will tell you one odd coincidence, though. Before the parents moved into the farmhouse, they actually had a dog, which got ran over, unfortunately. And the mom named the dog Bathsheba before moving into the house, before they even knew of that name.
That is strange.
Yeah, that's
a
weird coincidence.
Case of like synchronicity.
Yeah. Let's talk about the things that happened in this set and what happened to the actors. James Wan was offered to film in the actual Conjuring house, and he absolutely did not want to. So that's why they filmed in North Carolina. He was also offered to visit the house just to see it, and he didn't want to either. Joey King, which is one of the actors, she mentioned that she experienced something weird as well. During the filming of the movie, she got mysterious bruises all over her body. The makeup ladies thought that she was stealing their makeup and, making a prank, and that she had fake bruises. And they tried to wipe them off with like alcohol and rubbing oil, but they couldn't. So she went to the doctor, and she got a couple of blood tests, and her doctor told her it could be earlier signs of leukemia. And she was freaking out because she was only 12 years old when she was filming this movie. She then got more blood tests and is told that she had this blood thinning condition called ITP, where most of her red blood cells drain from her body mysteriously. She never had a blood problem in the past, never had a problem since then. No one in her family has had that. She was at risk of needing a blood transfusion, and they were afraid to let her work because if she touched something, she could get easily bruised. So she had to go to the hospital every day, twice a day, before and after work filming, to get her blood taken to check her levels.
It's intense.
Yeah,
and that's a lot for a little kid too.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of stress too. I'm imagining she's probably psyching herself out. She's 12 years old.
Yeah, and you're like, this is my big break.
Yeah. So when the shooting finished, she came back home and she went back routinely, as she always did, to the doctors. And they told her that her
or platelets. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. We're obviously nurses over here.
Her platelets were completely fine. So this is once they were done filming. She went and they told her that her platelets were completely fine. And she was back up to normal numbers, and she hasn't since had a trace of that disorder. And then we have Vera Farmiga, which is actually the actor that played Lorraine. She took the role, and when she was done discussing things with James, she opened her laptop and saw claw marks across it. The last day after she flew back and came home from North Carolina, where they filmed, the next morning, she woke up in her bed. The same claw marks appeared on her thigh, which she actually has a picture to show.
I mean, on her laptop. Yeah. I don't know which one I'm more upset about.
I'd probably be more upset with the laptop, to be honest.
Really?
So there was another incident where they wanted to interview the family at the set. And the mom was going to go, surprisingly, and last minute she decided not to. And the daughters went, and then they got a call as they were filming that the mom fell and broke her hip. They flew back home, and the mom told her that she was pushed, and she didn't want anything to do with the movie or anything like that.
So it seems like every time even she tries to get involved, she just can't.
Yeah,
or is scared not to. Yeah,
and then, there's a lot of more things into it, like a lot of people that worked with the set and in the movie dealt with more things as well. The set even caught on fire.
If we can learn from this true story, it's that if your kids or pets don't want to go into the house, don't go into that house.
Yeah, it's not worth the stress. It's not worth the trauma. And
ask for the history.
Yeah, actually, in that time, they didn't have to disclose that information during that time. But I'm thankful that we're in this time now, and that you do have to disclose if there's any suicides or anything, any death or anything that would depreciate the value of the house.
Yeah,
that's something good to know.
Agreed.
So this was the origins of The Conjuring. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I do apologize if it was, a little bit everywhere, but I did try my best. But I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and let us know how we did on our first episode. We do appreciate any constructive criticism as well. And I apologize for my stuttering.
And Sam, I think you did great. And yes, thank you so much for listening. This is our first episode, so bear with us. But I think Sam killed it.
And last thing I'll say is keep your lights on.
And finish your beer if you're drinking one.